Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Woo! And we are reacting to all the best looks from the Met Gala. That's why you come to PoliticsJOE. Imagine, how angry do you think they would be?
I would watch that podcast.
I don't think they'd be angry at all.
Well, depending on how we title it. Seán Hickey, how are you?
I'm great, Ed Campbell. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Excellent.
Are you angry about Rangers tifo at the weekend?
No, not really. I did see an AI version of it.
Right.
That looked a lot better than the real life.
I thought it was quite cool.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
how good can a tifo
by the standards of Rangers tifos, it was a decent tifo, but it was still a bit
Because
shit.
it didn't mention any terrorists, is that?
Well, famously, that's the only tifo that I recognise as a decent tifo. If it has an effigy hanging from the gantry, then I'm there.
That's what qualifies. Laura, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How was your bank holiday?
It was good, thank you very much. Did you get up to anything exciting?
I went to Brighton, which was
Oh,
very
nice.
Yeah.
What did you get up to?
My cousin's studying there, so I went to
Nice.
visit her.
Brighton is a very nice place.
What's your favourite Rangers tifo?
I don't even know what a tifo is.
Okay, great news, everyone. You get to mansplain to Laura in the comments. Brighton, very appropriate place for you to go this weekend, considering what you got up to on Friday.
Yeah, the Greens. And Zack Polanski had officially launched his leadership bid to oust Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey from the leadership of the Green Party. And he has a vision for the party that he thinks would make it ready to take on reform.
Now, if you don't know who Zack Polanski is, there's a very interesting clip of him performing in a choir at the Lib Dem conference, which I think maybe gives you a good idea.
Is that what
Are we playing the
is that
clip?
the only is that the only thing that we know Zack Polanski for?
And famously, we give the Greens a hard time in this podcast, don't we?
I actually think what you're about to say makes him more likeable.
So he hypnotised Laura on Friday. That's why her laptop is covering her entire upper body.
And me, and that's why my pecs look bigger. Zack Polanski once claimed in a newspaper article he could use hypnotism to make women's breasts grow.
He has subsequently apologised for that.
But we found
He
out
still said it.
we found out on Friday afternoon that he had a clinic in Harley Street to do that in. It wasn't just that he claimed that he was doing it. He had an office where he did that.
Right, so this Glee adjacent hypnotherapist. That is like a plot from Glee, isn't it? Like someone claiming they can make sort of like Rachel Berry's boobs bigger through hypnotism. He wants to turn the Greens into a radical, populist, eco-socialist party, taking
With
it
a
to
massive wreck.
I can inflate our share of the votes, just like I can make that flat-chested woman curvy. Are we being unfair to Zack? I don't think we are. I don't think we can ever talk about this enough. I did absolutely wish out of mentioning to him on election night, which I regret to this day. Is that where Sadiq Khan's come from?
No, because we were saying that's separate.
Sadiq Khan's comes from Susan Hall being anti-trans, does it not?
so it's just, what if Sadiq Khan got
There's so many good bits from this podcast.
That's great stuff. Okay, hopefully we can come up with more of it and just not retread old stuff. What did you find most interesting from your chat with Zack?
I think what's interesting is he thinks that the Greens actually have a good selection of policies in their manifesto, things like a wealth tax, things to do with like social and economic justice. But he says right now they have a messaging problem. When he goes to the doors, people say, oh, we really like the Green Party, but I think we need a left-wing party as well to go hand in hand with them. And he's frustrated because he said the Green Party are that left-wing party. And he thinks that they could be kind of the left-wing populist alternative to reform for people who are dissatisfied with the Labour Party. Should we hear a little bit of him talking about the lessons he thinks the Greens can learn from reform?
Yes, please.
Why do you think that reform have been able to pick up these voters that want a change from Labour? What are they doing that's reaching these people that the Greens currently aren't?
So I think it's a few things. I think, first of all, I have no truck with reform in terms of Nigel Farage is a millionaire who pretends to speak up for working class populations, but actually is speaking up or serving billionaires. I think that's really clear. At the same time, we've really got to separate the reform MPs and Nigel Farage's operation from people who might be thinking about voting reform. Ultimately, those people are the people we have to show compassion and care for, because they're the exact people who have been disenfranchised by a two-party system that has failed them through successive governments. And also, things are really hard for people right now. And just when you see mainstream politicians from the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, from the two old parties, talking about politics, there just seems like an utter complacency and lack of what's going on out there. Now, what Nigel Farage, I'd say, is very good at is switching costumes. We saw this with steel nationalisation, for instance, a policy that makes complete sense. The Labour Party should have been talking about it a long time ago, and the Green Party have been talking about it for years, in fact. What I think we haven't done, though, is we haven't cut through. And I think that's sometimes because we're too technical with our policy and our detail. Now, I'm really proud that I come from a party that thinks a lot about the detail, that is very democratic, that has debates and is constantly evolving its policy. I don't want to change that at all. I think that's really at the heart of what our party is. What I think is also true, though, is when we communicate, far too often, we are selling the recipe of the ingredients and not the final product. And I think what we need to do more and more of is explain how we're going to help people in their lives, how we're going to make sure that people have got food on the table, that they've got heating in their homes, and that they can get to work. And, you know, even if they're not working, they are also supported too. And I think reform do this to an extent, but actually, as soon as they have any real scrutiny, you can see it fall apart quite quickly. And, you know, since the general election, 95% of their donations have been from oil and gas giants and climate denying companies. That's £2.3 million. I put it to their former head of comms last night on LBC, and he just kept outright denying it. And I just had a moment where I thought, well, I can talk about that it's there on the Electoral Commission, which it is, and it's plain to see. But how do you deal with a party that will just lie, that will just make up stories, and emotional stories at that? So I'm not making excuses, but I think for anyone on the left, we do have a harder job. We've both got to start from a place of truth and a place of fact, so there's credibility in what we're saying, and also tell a good, emotional, compelling story. All Farage has to do is the emotional, compelling story, which he does very well.
It's interesting, isn't it? The battle I think the Greens have to fight, maybe in terms of their image. I think the point about you're making, Laura, about people think of the Greens and don't necessarily think like left-wing party. They think sort of like Extinction Rebellion or like chaining themselves to trees. Sean, how much do you think of the fight for the Greens is going to be an image and perception problem?
I think it's almost entirely image and perception, to be honest with you. I think I've said it on the podcast before, but I've certainly said it on the desk, that Green parties across Europe have got an issue now where the centre left and the left have adopted the ideas of the Greens. So now they have an issue of what separates us from the traditional left-wing parties. Maybe they just need to change their name. Maybe it just needs to be a left-wing party with a green livery, and that's it. But it doesn't need to be the Green Party anymore. Just
the new Green Party.
The new Green Party, yeah. Change. I don't know. It's the Greens as they currently stand to the general public do not seem, in terms of their eco policies, radical enough compared to what a Labour Party or a Lib Dem is. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, they have wealth taxes. Yes, they have kind of some radical policies. But the thing that makes the Greens exist as a standalone entity has already been taken by the rest of the centre and the rest of the left. So it's either you stop your messaging being entirely around or in some way around the environment and make it all about economic disparity, about reindustrialization in some way, shape or form. It doesn't necessarily have to be green industrialization. But yeah, I think it's entirely an identity crisis rather than some messaging, some policy, but mainly identity. Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a perception issue as well, which Zack Polanski brought up about the Greens being the party of the kind of university educated middle classes who are environmentally minded, a bit like crunchy hippie granola types. But he's saying that's not who he thinks the base of the party is or should be. And he mentioned what he'd love to happen is to have someone like Clive Myrie or Zara Sultana. Who...
Clive Lewis, not Clive Myrie.
Again.
No,
Please. Clive Myrie.
Did you also say crunchy instead of crusty?
Crunchy, no,
Crunchy,
good.
yeah.
Crunchy,
Yeah,
okay,
she's got
right,
one thing
right.
wrong. Clive Myrie.
Crunchy Clive Myers.
Aiming for the moon. I would love for Clive Myrie to become a Green Party.
He wants someone like Zara Sultana or Clive Lewis to cross the floor to the Green Party because he thinks MPs like that with their economic way of thinking is more reflective if you think what the Greens are.
I think that's maybe a big ask considering they're in the governing party.
Yeah.
Come and join us.
Is
Aren't
Zara,
you?
is Zara,
Zara Sultana's an independent
Yeah.
now.
Still, well, but she's been in the Labour Party for however long. And
Yeah.
she may be readmitted at some point.
I think he was making the argument that people with her politics have more of a home in the Green Party now than they do in the Labour Party, given the direction that it's going.
That's interesting. Should we talk about where the Greens are sitting kind of electorally at this point? They had their best ever performance in a general election. They've got 4 MPs. They've got Cara Denyer, Adrian Ramsay, Shannon Berry and Ellie Chowns. Zack Polanski isn't actually an MP. He's a member of the London Assembly. They had a disappointing council election. They came third in the mayoral race for the West of England seat, which is interesting because that includes Bristol, where that seems like it should be green. That's crunchy.
It's as crunchy as it gets in England.
What a crusty, crunchy little city. Yummy. So England is now a 5-party country, according to John Curtis. So there is opportunity here. There is a realignment of the vote, and we've seen we've seen results that you wouldn't believe. Like 10 years ago, we've seen in the case of the pro-gas independents kind of across the country being elected reform, you wouldn't have given much credence to their performance even 5 years ago. So I think there maybe is an opportunity for the Greens to capitalise on this. A minister said to The Guardian, a Labour minister, I think we are extraordinarily fortunate that the Green Party are shit.
I think on the image problem that relates to like the councils and governance is that they have a reputation as NIMBYs. And I think when so many people are concerned about housing and really just want houses to be built so they can afford somewhere to live, having a party that, especially if you're young, is NIMBY might put you off voting for them. I think the other thing is we saw immigration play quite heavily into the local elections through the asylum hotels. And we saw Zia Youssef on the broadcast round saying that reform-led councils would take the Home Office to court if they tried to house asylum seekers in their council areas. And I think immigration is one of the areas where I don't think the Greens necessarily have a coherent answer to what they would do about it.
It's also they need to become a lot nastier quite quickly if they want to stand up to reform. I'm not necessarily sure that the Greens will be going to toe-to-toe with reform in a lot of places. I think, like, demographically, that might... But who knows? The things are in total flux. But even in the interview with you, Laura, I thought it was interesting how reflexively Zack Polanski used the language of... And I'm not using this in, like, a derogatory sense, but he was using, like, ultra-woke language. Like, he was using, like terms...
It's like the language of social justice movements.
Yes, exactly that. Like, he was using terms like this global majority. He was using terms like... Of course, I want the Greens to stand for environmental justice, racial justice, social justice. And I'm sure he absolutely fervently believes that. And I'm not making any assessments of the legitimacy of those values. But speaking in those terms, I think, turns a lot of people off. And if you're going up against Nigel Farage, and imagine a national debate.
Yeah.
And so he goes, so imagine you've...
It can stay in the manifesto, that kind of stuff.
Zack Polanski is standing there going like, I believe in... for the global majority, and Nigel Farage goes vegan, and like that's what they're not even necessarily playing the same game. And if he can lean into the nastiness, if he's the person who can get down and dirty. I'm not necessarily sure that Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey have a nasty bone in their body. But I'm not. Is Zack Polanski the person who to lead to transform the Greens into this nasty, like street fighting team?
You need to find a way to make leftism sexy, and currently, it is not. And if you want to be the party that is, I think as well with your point that like he's saying he wants to take the fight to reform, but I think you're right to say the fight isn't with reform, but I think to some extent it may be. Like Runcorn went to reform from Labour. It's a Labour save seat. There is a section of the traditional Labour voter that is going that way, and the Green Party has got ample opportunity to bring them back into leftist politics. They can be the party of the union. They can be the party of kind of like the regeneration of forgotten towns and villages, which is effectively the messaging that reform is going after in the first place. You know, they might have unrealistic or a little bit too right radical policies on whether it's immigration or whether it's fracking or like energy in general. But there are still there are sections of politics that the Green Party can be reaching into to win people back from reform. And yeah, in doing so, you need to be able to do it in a way that approaches people where they are, rather than trying to bring people along on your social justice, racial justice. If you're there, you're there. You don't need to try and get everybody there. You need to meet people where they are, and where they are is they cannot afford to heat their homes. They cannot afford to have a night out on the weekend. You need to be reaching them for these conditions rather than the language of 2015, 2016 politics.
I wonder if because of how dire people's like immediate economic situation is with cost of living, not being able to get the housing ladder, if there has generally been a turn away from environmental politics, because when you're faced with those daily realities, things like net zero and reaching it seem like in the immediate term a waste. Because I mean, if you look at even Tony Blair came out to say that there's been too much focus on net zero, reform hammer on and on and on about net stupid zero, as Richard Tice calls it. So I wonder
Great line.
Yeah, I wonder if generally there is like a turn away in the voter base from pursuing environmental policies.
I wonder, there's definitely a market for green policies, and it's just about cut through, I guess. I think something that I see people talk about less is we hear a lot about the angry young men going to reform, which to some extent I think is maybe overinflated in people's mind. But where are the angry young women going? I don't necessarily think that reform offers much. They don't seem to be appealing to young women necessarily. And I wonder if the Greens can siphon off people who are, if you picture like a young woman graduate who cares about Palestine and is really, really angry at the Labour Party, do you think that person is going to vote reform? Probably not. So is there now a new vessel for rage, young rage? If the Greens can harness that, that's a really good opportunity. I think what part of reform's appeal to people is that for ages in England, there wasn't necessarily like a viable option to express your discontent with the status quo. That I think that's a large part why the SNP became so big in Scotland. But if you can present yourself, if there's two options, could we end up with, I don't know, a reform government and a green opposition?
I think it's interesting because like to capture that youth vote, like the way that Jeremy Corbyn and Momentum and everyone did, it's almost like you need to resort to vibes-based politics. And like that's what reform do so well, is vibes-based politics is what Corbyn did really well. And like this idea of kind of building a coalition of like culturally influential figures who endorse you. I think it's something that Zack Polanski is trying to do. We saw like over the weekend quite a few quite prominent left-wing journalists who were involved with Momentum come out and back Zack Polanski. But I wonder if that's enough, because that's not the same as Stormzy bringing you up
No.
on stage at Glastonbury.
And I suppose Zach's mounting his leadership campaign, I suppose. So he's trying to appeal to Green members
Yes.
at this point. And I also think it should be noted, he's not doing this like unceremoniously. There's a scheduled leadership election in the summer.
Yeah.
He's not just like absolutely broken ranks.
Finished.
And now,
He's not. Who's the guy who challenged Corbyn? Owen Smith. He's not Owen Smithing it. I spoke to friend of PoliticsJOE, No Justice MTG yesterday. She's involved in the Green Party. She's a member, I'm right in saying, and she said, actually had a really good point about people like Farage because he's an iconoclast. They don't necessarily agree with all of his politics, what he stands for, and might actually not align with what their views are, even within the party. I think I've spoken about this before, but there's a great line about Farage talking about billionaires leaving the country as if that's a bad thing, and people cheering at Reform Conference. But they love him anyway. So what they want is someone to be absolutely fuck the system. So if Zach, I'm not sure that is Zack Polanski to his bones. I'm not sure the man in the Lib Dem choir is the rebel without a cause that people can attach themselves
The tick
to.
guy.
Actually, do you know what? That is transgressive, isn't it? Inflating women's breasts with your mind. That is transgressive.
The most Chad a Chad can be.
So if you can do that, then you might be onto a winner.
Could you imagine like the steampunk right-esque strategy around Zack Polanski just being entirely around him hypnotizing women to make their breasts bigger?
Meeting someone.
Yeah.
Who had to have like corrective surgery. Have we got anything else to say about Zack and the Green Party?
I think that's the most I've ever spoken about the Green Party.
I think that's the most respect they've ever been given. We're only making jokes about Carla Denier's name, but less maybe Carla Denier.
COVID denier.
No, the other one.
that's her child.
Oh, my husband, vaccine.
Yes. And shall we move on?
We shall.
Excellent. Should we talk about reform?
Yes.
Let's talk about reform.
They're going to be angry about this. Did you see Carol? I'm going to completely butcher her name. Cadwallader. There's not enough vowels in that surname. I'm really sorry, but there's not. Was angry at the Observer, her former employer, for profiling women in reform yesterday, saying this is how reform win. And someone said, "Oh yeah, the massive media power of the Observer," which made me laugh. Yeah, what a bloody weekend for them.
Yeah, girl power wins once again.
Absolutely.
You love to see it.
That's what
You really love to see
all women are feminists.
You can't criticize reform now for
being
being
a
part of the
feminist party.
manosphere. Yeah.
Oh, they've got a female MP now.
Yeah, Sarah Pochin.
Great news. The proportion of MPs who have assaulted a woman down. It's declined.
Did we know that?
Actually, we should check quickly. At first value, it was at 25%, and we are down to 20.
Down to
Come
20.
on. That's
Good
a
work,
great
Nigel.
result for the
Great
lads.
work, Nigel.
That's a great result. He didn't say that he's still an MP. That's absolutely mental.
Just the whole time. He's just been sat in the House of Westminster.
If someone's getting cheeky, he's like... I think he kicked her. He's got warming his ankles up. Yeah.
Warming his ankles.
You know, before, like you presumably did before a fight.
Yeah.
You're just kind of, doing like circles.
Yeah,
on the benches.
got you. Oh, he's going like full hog. Like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to warm it up.
I think, can I make a point
No.
about reform?
No. We're still
Is it funny? Is it a joke? Okay, that's interesting. No, you can go, of
So-
course.
Let's entertain it.
They now have almost 700 councillors, and I think there's two main problems that come with that. The first is, what are those councils going to look like? How will they govern? Because they've said some really interesting things about what they're going to do as councillors, which I think the one everyone's heard of is the Doge for councils. But they said they want to divert money into social care, SEN needs, and potholes. So I think if they actually were able to deliver those services, that would be quite popular. And Darren Grimes, their new councillor.
It is funny that we now have to
I'm
take
so
these people
serious.
seriously as political operators.
Or do we? Can we not just be like, Darren Graham's a fucking idiot. And the fact he's in your party
I
is a
wonder
mark
if Durham
against you.
City Council have a live feed of the operations in there, or if he's even gonna go. Like, well, he does live in Durham now, doesn't he?
I've got no idea where he lives.
Or no, because he was doing his GB News show from
Durham?
the north. Yeah,
Sick.
yeah.
That's why they're the People's Channel, of course. Sorry to interrupt you with some riffing.
Darren Grimes's GB News show was called Real Britain, and Lee Anderson's is called The Real World. It's just like a series of shows. Real.
It's just because
the programs are real. The presenters are real. GB News
is real. We are scripted, but unreal. Real opinions. Real people. The voices in my head are real. Do you know, sorry, just to interrupt. Do we know the story about, I think it was Mark Stein? Was he the guy who got kicked off?
Yes.
The Canadian guy. And he'd be saying something, just like absolutely putting off-com regulations to the story. And people, producers would be like, Mark, stop it. He would rip out his earpiece like, they're trying to stop me telling you this.
Real uncensored opinion.
Real voices. Real danger.
Real sacking. Real job losses.
Real views. Sorry, you said Darren Grimes and was sent us absolutely sideways. Please say Mark Stein next.
Darren Grimes said that they won't be spending money on net zero projects, rainbow road crossings, or £70,000 a year diversity managers. And then obviously, like we said before, asylum hotels is the other kind of pledge that they've made to their voters. The other question, I think, is previously we've seen a lot of issues with candidate vetting coming from reform. There's now 700 councillors. I wonder what stories are going to possibly come out about maybe if the vetting should have been more thorough.
Yes, it seems they claim it's been amped up.
Yes.
Since the election.
But the head of vetting was Jack Aarons, who defended comments he made about Hitler.
What was he?
Well, it's not as bad as that. So.
I'll get up the actual quote because I don't want to libel.
Yeah. You would never want to do that about a guy that's praising Hitler.
Yeah.
Praise Hitler and Assad.
Yes, and
he's a basher guy.
Putin as well.
Basher pilled.
He said Hitler was brilliant at inspiring people.
Brilliant. Not the thing you think I think it is.
Hitler was a great dresser.
Bashir al-Assad was gentle by nature.
Jesus Christ.
And Vladimir Putin's use of force in Ukraine was legitimate.
Okay.
The demure Syrian dictator.
Did we see Zaya Yusuf's comments about the British education system?
No, what were they?
He was interviewed in the Times, and he says that people in this country, children in this country, are taught to hate this country. And I thought it'd be maybe a good chance to kind of reflect on our school days and learn all the vicious.
Oh, we were taught to hate Britain.
Yeah, but maybe the Irish. I hate Britain so much. I pay taxes here.
I generally remember like the extent of so I didn't take history past like my second year of high school. And I remember the extent of my education about the British Empire was being handed a map and told to colour in like everywhere that we used to own.
Everything! And then when you said, I actually think the British Empire was a force for good, you were given 6 of the best. Mm-hmm. Which, for some reason, in that part of the east of Scotland, they were still allowing. I did history all throughout school, and I don't think at any point they sat down and were like, evil. Mm. It's such an interesting, like, they talk about this all the time, is like kids in schools are being taught to be trans. Mm-hmm. They're given litter boxes, and they're also taught that Winston Churchill was a bad guy. Yeah. And only one of those things is true, and it's the litter boxes. They are handing them out. It's just like it's one of these things that it's just a lie that completely falls apart if you speak to a child at all about like what like
which you do frequently.
And also, sorry, Laura, is there much? What other parts of the curriculum would you have to give up in order to implement like Britain is the greatest country in the world lessons. Like
Maths and science.
Yeah, you're
are
right,
the
actually.
first ones out the window. Come on,
ICT.
like
Do you get rid of that?
I'm not even a reform voter, but like I know these are the
That's why I'm going,
basics. Ed.
You work in the arts. You're not. No, you don't. Do we? Is this art?
Is this art?
The media is what I mean. You don't need
Performance
Scientology.
art.
It's just podcasting. There's no degree for that. Sorry, though. You're doing such good work, and we're just interrupting.
Right, I actually forgot my point.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted.
I think with reform though, it's kind of, it could be an issue for them in 4 years' time that they now actually have such a mass appeal in local politics that there's now something for the establishment parties to point at when they're saying, well, they say X, Y, and Z, but they're not implementing anything that they could possibly do in X, Y, or Z council. Like you could very well see in the future there being a case of reform councillors in a council that they have overall control of whinging about the potholes outside the council building that they have direct responsibility for, you know. So it will be interesting now in the next couple of months and next couple of years to see what the establishment parties can do to kind of counter the rise of reform in that way.
But then it's also they're playing by different rules. Like if the
Up until now, they've been playing by different rules.
But I don't think I don't think they're suddenly going to start playing by the rules. I think like if a reform controlled council now fails to fill in the potholes, it's not their fault. It's the blob's fault.
Yeah.
It's the woke civil servants who are like who are just being like saboteurs against reform's quest to make your high street great again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well because I think that that's like the negative side that they'll face. But I think the positive is that these councils will act as like a training ground so that in 5 years' time, they know who their rising stars are within the party and then can field them as MPs.
It's like a kung fu movie montage. The 700 reform councillors.
But I think that's the thing is like all their or not all of them, but a large part of their councillors have no experience in local government or any form of government, and that's the challenge they face now. But then by the time they go to field MPs, they will have had 4 years under their belt. And also Zia Youssef, who's the chairman of the party, has started a Centre for Excellence, which is like a training programme that he's going to give out to councillors.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that will entail. Also, that's also interesting because Youssef hasn't had any experience in governing as well. So I'd actually be interested to see what do you think being a good councillor is. I also think for their MPs further down the line, they will have a very long list of people who they should not let be MPs.
Should we be concerned in any way of how big a win reform had in the locals?
I think what was really interesting about where reform were winning is that in both seats that Labour were defending and seats that the Conservatives were defending, reform on average got the same vote share, which was 32%. So it actually didn't matter if it was a Labour or a Conservative seat. The same amount were voting for reform.
I suppose there's two sides to it, isn't it? Because like if you project those numbers onto a general election, and you like statistically, you should not do that. Like this is not a representative sample of the country, and it excludes like Scotland as well. But that isn't anywhere close to a majority. It must be. It's a larger vote share than they got at the general election for sure. And so within a year, that's like a pretty incredible achievement. And the way they have professionalised the party, but because we just use the batshit system of first past the post, that could be any number of seats. And I think trying to predict anything about their national performance from this, I think is maybe a mistake because it's not really that applicable. And I suppose it's certainly not good for the news for the Labour Party, like getting a kicking this early into they're not even a year in office and they're getting an absolute shoeing. It's also interesting, sort of, there's been more rancour amongst Labour MPs about Starmer's performance. I wonder if we're seeing the beginning of the end for Starmer, and what a short beginning it would have been as well. What do you think, Laura?
We saw Louise Haig, I think in the Times, say saying basically that she was quite disappointed with how things like the winter fuel payment have been played out, and she was basically calling for more radical action and saying that, I mean, she was the former transport minister, saying that the Labour government should break their fiscal rules and increase spending.
That they invented
Yes,
in the
they
first
should.
place.
The fiscal rules that are not real, and they can break at any opportunity. And already did.
Already did,
think
made
it-
them up in the first
Was
place.
that with defence spending? Was that, or they changed them to allow for more greater defence spending?
I think you might be right there, yeah.
Yeah. So just make new fucking rules, or just don't have this. Don't constrain yourself to this insane. I don't know.
You see, that's like a slight tangent, but like breaking your fiscal rules to spend more on defense, to send weapons to Ukraine, should be enough to prove, well, actually, we can make change in the areas that, as Louise Haig is saying, that directly affect the people that are turning away from the Labour Party. If something like the local election results is not a warning to the Labour Party, and I'm not saying that this is going to be, this is a forecast of Reform winning the next election, far from it, but the fact that the general public have voted in the numbers that they have for the Reform Party should be enough to say, we need to do something radical and we need to do it now. We can't just keep saying we need to make people poorer faster. We need to find other ways of doing it.
Yep.
Like that's not the answer. The answer is to be the Labour Party, to be the party for the people that are turning away from or turning towards reform. I mean, you see it like whether it's America, the kind of, the phenomenon of, certainly in 2016, maybe less so in 2024, but the kind of the Bernie bro turned Trump voter.
Yeah.
That like ideology does not matter when you have, like, you can't eat a flag, you can't eat ideology. You can't expect people to just consistently vote for the Labour Party because they're the Labour Party.
Yep.
If you're not changing people's material conditions, they're going to turn away from you.
And especially if Polanski revitalises the Green Party, Labour would like to say, well, if you don't vote for reform, we'll get in. And if you have a Green Party making like a positive case for left-wing policies, then that's a much more attractive vote rather than like a negative vote, isn't it? So they're facing danger on all sides. So we're in a 5-party country now.
Do you think that there is a future for the Conservatives?
Oh, we've not talked about them at all, have we? Oh my God. They got a kicking as well. Do I think there's a...
It was basically a straight swap between Conservative seats in councils and Reform.
Kemi Badenoch called it a bloodbath.
Jesus. Wow.
Do you know the only place where the Conservatives made gains?
Ooh, that's interesting. No.
It was in Robert Jenrick's constituency, where he had been out campaigning.
Jenrick mania.
Bobby J.
Bring me Bobby J.
Courses through England, across the country,
The people want Robert.
in dining rooms, everyone's saying, "Give me Bobby, give me Bobby Jenrick." Oh,
A Bobby for me, please.
I think Robert Jenrick has such a high idea of himself that it doesn't reflect reality as well. I don't think, as in, sure, Kemi's crap. Put Bobby in. Conservative Party is still crap.
Yeah. I mean, Kemi Badenoch basically made this point herself on Koonsberg. She said, "We had a bad night, and what this shows for a lot of people who hope that just changing the leader again would fix everything is that that's not going to be enough." Which is an insane
You're stuck with me.
phone. Yeah.
I know I'm shit, but we have to go with it.
But because obviously a lot of people are calling for a leadership election within the Conservatives to
think it's
install
so early.
Robert Jenrick. But her point is just, are we just going to cycle through equally shit leaders?
Yeah, sure, like if you're Bobby J, Jobby Bobby, then then you're biding your time until Badenoch completely fucks it. Like, no, this is like, she fucked it here, but this wasn't unexpected. This was kind of what they got an absolute kicking at the general election. Have they done anything to build those numbers back up? Absolutely fucking not. Kicking, but that's like. It's not surprising. So when she absolutely fucks it, then you make your move. Surely you don't be like, well, I'm the savior of the Conservative Party. Robert Jenrick. I wonder if that's what Cleverly's doing, sort of being less on manoeuvres.
Like biding his time.
Yes.
I wonder if we'll see defections to reform from the Conservatives before that happens.
To reform.
Yeah, people like Suella Braverman.
I wonder if what is in that for reform apart from getting another MP?
Well, I mean, Andrea Jenkins is their mayor of Greater Lincolnshire now.
Yeah.
Sarah Pochen was also a Conservative councillor before.
But I think someone like Braverman was one of the main faces of an incredibly unpopular government. I don't think the Conservative brand is toxic at this point, and I think would maybe denigrate reform in a way. Like reform's thing is like we're new. Like if you think actually kind of maybe
even
apart
though
from
they aren't.
Yeah.
But I think about like the guy who won the boxer who won the mayoral election. I can't remember where that was, but I think it was certainly in the north. Like he's new. We're like we are the new thing. And if you're something like, and here's Suella Braverman, you're like that doesn't really lend credence to their argument. Like if you have people, if you suddenly have an army of professional MPs, then you can no longer say we're here to fuck Westminster up. You can say that with the man who assaulted his girlfriend. Like he shouldn't be in Parliament. So I think I'm not sure why Reform would want those MPs, especially not Bobby J.
But he himself is almost modelling his vision for the Conservative Party seems to be a shadow of reform.
Yeah.
So the way that there is a certain sect of the Conservative Party that are reform MPs already, that like what is the future of the Conservative Party if not to either merge or die?
Yep.
Essentially. And I mean, yeah, like Robert Jenrick's whole thing in the lead up to the local election was we're going to have alliances with reform, and then Kemi Badenoch being like, no, we're not. Like it's probably the best thing that the Conservative Party can do at this point to stay afloat.
Yeah.
She doesn't really offer much in the way of, like, we don't know what her vision for the Conservative Party is, apart from just keeping it the way it was in some way, shape or form.
It's just whatever Matt Goodwin tweets.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane.
It would be so mental if like Rishi Sunak was the last Conservative Prime Minister.
Yep.
And like that was the end of the party that has governed Britain for the majority of its modernity. It's just ended.
Okay, we had a brief break for a fire alarm. If that's why there was a jump cut. Have we talked about reform enough?
I think so.
We've talked. Well, guys, we've balanced out with the Green Party, so suck it if you're angry about this. Thank you very much for joining me, guys. That was good fun.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you for having us. Yeah.
It's the A+ team.
Well,
I don't like when you guys call yourselves the B team.
I'm the only one that calls it.
I do it in private, but just not in public. It's the A* team today. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Join us on the subreddit for some good faith discussion and to vent about how much we were talking about reform there. We will see you all tomorrow.
Bye.